Thank you all for joining our first budget engagement listening session. This is an opportunity for city staff to hear from you. Before we get started, I wanted to do a few brief introductions and some housekeeping items. In the room today, we have Ryan Bergman, the Strategy and Budget Director, Kelly Flannery, the CFO, Taiwo Jehovah, an ACM and Planning Director, and Tracy Dodson, ACM and Director of Economic Development. We also have city staff and budget staff on the WebEx and in the room to help us get through our first engagement session. So welcome. I'll go through a few housekeeping items, and then our director, Ryan Bergman, will talk about a budget, give a process roadmap, and then share some City of Charlotte budget highlights. And then we want to hear from you. We're asked that you raise the hand feature in WebEx to be added to the speaking list, and then we'll share some budget resources for you to stay connected throughout this whole process. During this listening session, our goal is to collect feedback from you, our community, and we will answer as many questions as we can live. Anything that we need to go back and research will be sent via email and posted online. Following a brief presentation from our budget director, we'll move into an interactive poll to gain insight of what's important to you. We will then close out with an open discussion. For polling, you will see a window pop up on the side of your screen. Select which option you would like to vote for and click submit. When it's time for open discussion, you can sign up using the raise your hand feature to be called upon, or sign up using the Q&A window. The raise your hand icon is on the right panel of your screen. It looks like a high five. Staff will keep a list of who is next to speak, and when it's your turn, we will call your name and you will be unmuted. We ask that you keep your comments to 2 minutes. At any time, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A window. If you do not see it now, click the 3 dots next to the chat button at the right bottom of your screen and select Q&A. With that, I'll turn it over to our budget director, Ryan Bergman, to kick off our session with a brief overview of the City of Charlotte's budget.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for your commitment joining us on a beautiful day outside. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the city's budget. I only have 7 slides. I'm trying to keep this to 5 to 10 minutes because this is really intended to be a listening session. But there are some concepts in the budget and how it works that would be helpful, in my opinion, for you guys before you're able to provide some feedback for us. One of the most important concepts is that we are in a city and a county that has a split government, where the city handles some services and the county handles some services. What you see on the screen on the left is your property tax bill. So about 2/3 of your property tax bill will go to the county, and about 1/3 of your property tax bill will go to the city. So what that means is if you have a $200,000 house, about $1,200 of your property tax bill goes to the county, about $600 or $700 of your property tax bill goes to the city. And you can see on the left there some of the functions that each does. When you combine all of the services that the city offers and the county offers, that table on the right there is our top 5 services dollar-wise. So where does your property tax dollars go? The biggest thing is to the county to then support Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, followed by CMPD, which is a city function, Health and Human Services, which is a county function, county detention and support, so think of the jail and the justice system, which is also a county function, and then Charlotte Fire, which is a city function. So really, when you're thinking about the city budget, you're thinking about your life and safety response, your police, your fire. You're thinking about your roads, and then you're also thinking about affordable housing. So it goes a little bit beyond that even, and I certainly won't read everything on the right, but of that amount of money that goes just to the city, about a little under 80% of it goes to our general fund to support the operating expenses of each year, such as police, fire, solid waste, some of your smaller scale transportation initiatives. But then about 20% of your tax bill goes to our capital program. So what that means is we use that money to build roads, to fix sidewalks, to do affordable housing initiatives through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So when you combine those two together, what you get on the table on the right is a better reflection of where your tax dollars went in FY21, which is the current budget year you're in. You'll see that police is still the highest with about 31%, but you'll see higher amounts for some of the other initiatives, such as housing and transportation, than if you just looked at our general fund. So a couple of concepts here for how the city's general fund is organized. I won't read them, but you'll see the dollar amount in FY21 for each of the services in that box in the middle. But the funds on the left are your governmental funds, and by that we mean we use your property tax dollars and sales tax dollars to pay for those. If you go over on the right, you get other organizations that the city council is also responsible for, but they're not funded with property tax dollars. So you have the airport, which of course is funded by user fees, businesses using the airport, things of that nature. You have CATS, which is funded by fees, but also supported by a dedicated sales tax of a half penny that goes to transit in Mecklenburg County. And then you have water and stormwater, which are very big organizations, but of course you're paying for that bill with your monthly water bill and your monthly stormwater bill. And then finally, the only thing I'll mention is our special revenue funds are a different bucket. I won't talk about those other than to say that you'll have some very specific items in there, and I'll use an example. When we talk about supporting some kind of a tourism or hospitality investment, it would come from special revenue funds, which are by state law required to go to something specific for that purpose. And so those are generated from things like occupancy taxes on hotels. So this is just a graphic, a little bit different reflection of our total property taxes, our total sales taxes that we have as a city. So the top bucket, which gets the majority of property tax and sales tax, is our general fund where we do most of our operations. And then the bottom two are part of our capital program. So if we build a new road, or if we do $50 million in affordable housing like we did this past bond cycle, we take out debt to do that, and we pay back the debt over the next 20 or 30 years based on the dollars we put in these buckets. So that supports our capital program. Our capital and our CIP, which is what you'll probably hear us referring it to today, is primarily our bond program, where every 2 years we go to the voters and we have a plan for how we're going to spend around $200 million worth of investments. Typically, these would be housing bonds, transportation bonds, and neighborhood bonds. These past two cycles, FY19 and FY21, we've dedicated $50 million to affordable housing bonds from that bucket. Going forward, we will not have a bond program in this upcoming budget just because it's an off year, as you'll see on the screen. But we are working with City Council to get their priorities on planning the two dotted lines, which would occur in FY23 and 25. So that's where they would make the decisions on how much of that would go to transportation and housing and neighborhoods and things of that nature. So it's really important to note that we do the budget based on City Council priorities. I think you guys are aware of this, but the people in the room are not the decision makers on the city budget. Our job is to gather information, analyze problems, make recommendations for City Council to make the ultimate decisions as your elected body. So we operate based on City Council's approved priorities, which you'll see on your screen. And I just wanted to give a small menu of some examples of current initiatives that we have ongoing just at this very moment, from a job strategy to Safe Charlotte, corridors, a 2040 vision plan. These are just some examples that help support some of those City Council priorities. And each one of those initiatives could be a 3-hour meeting. So I just wanted to touch on them, that we have these strategies developed in collaboration with City Council. And we're fortunate that we have Taiwo and Tracy in the room with us because they do spearhead a number of those initiatives. And then finally, I'll just end with the budget process roadmap for what it looks like. So in February, March, and April, we have budget work sessions with City Council, and we talk about a number of issues that we want to get in front of them or that they are requesting get in front of them. We get feedback from them. These are public meetings. Our next one is next Wednesday at 1:30. We try to get feedback from them to develop a proposed budget that the city manager puts together and presents in May. And from that, City Council will have several meetings and adjustments, and we end up with an approved budget in June to take effect in July 1st of each year. So talking about staying connected and engaged, this is one tool. I mean, as you guys, I'm sure, experienced in your own lives, COVID and everything that has come with it has changed things, made things different. We are trying to develop ways to continue budget feedback in this type of environment. What we have today is one of them. We also have a budget simulation tool. We have a survey. If we have not sent out the survey via email, we will do that to everybody signed up. And then we'll also send out a email that will have active during budget development for you to provide feedback, questions, or comments. And so that's the end of the presentation, just trying to provide context around some of the services that we do and how this works. As we move into a questions, a statement portion of this, which we'll do for the next 45 minutes, ideally, we want to spend most of the time listening. If you ask a question, we will try to provide a brief answer of the context, why we recommended something the way we did, or a little bit more information about the program. If you're providing a statement on things you'd like to see more funding or things of that nature, we may not respond, but I will tell you that we are gathering all of the information, statements, questions from both this, our email, and our survey into a community engagement packet that we want to give to City Council before we finalize budget development this year and turn the budget over to them through the manager's proposed budget. So with that, I will stop and we can move into a portion that's a little bit more conversational.
So just a reminder, if you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand using the raise your hand function in the lower right-hand corner. You can also type a question in the Q&A feature in the bottom right-hand feature as well. And we're also monitoring the comments on Facebook and YouTube, so we'll try to address those as they come in as well. I don't see any hands raised. I think it's because Ryan gave such a comprehensive overview. But we do want to hear from you. So if you are interested, please go ahead and raise your hand. In the meantime, we do have a poll question that we can answer, that we can ask of you to maybe get some of your juices flowing about budget stuff. So, Wendy, can we go to the first poll question? And we'll give you just a few more seconds to go ahead and answer the poll question, and then we can display the results. Okay, so we have the results on the screen. We thank you for your participation. We see a lot of good feedback there, so that's super helpful for us to move forward. We also have a couple persons who have raised their hands to speak. Sterling Scott.
Hey, thank you. I had a question. So kind of going back and referencing the slide that was shown that showed the city government spending through a pie chart. I wanted to have a good understanding of what's the impact of spending on a few of the other variables on police spending. So for example, the impact of spending on economic development, housing and neighborhood services, and transportation. Like if the levers pulled in spending is increased or decreased there, do we know how that impacts spending on police?
Sure. So a complicated question. I will take my best shot. So when we're talking about police spending, it's about a $290 million budget, but the majority of it is spent on personnel. So about 86% of the police budget is spent on officers and their benefits and their insurance, things of that nature. And so that seems like a lot of money, but the way it works out to, we have about 13 police divisions, and if you do the math for the size of the city, that works out to about 70,000 people in each of those divisions. And so we did some analysis over the summer, and we have about maybe 15 to 20 patrol officers in each of those divisions. We did analysis with 911 calls, and basically what it showed is that we have either the appropriate amount of officers to answer these calls, or we would actually need some more. So one of the most cost-intensive things that a government can do is, of course, answering calls for service, which is what police and fire do. But getting to your main question, as long as these calls for service are coming in at that level, in our opinion, we have been maintaining the budget for police to be able to respond to those services. As we do some of these other investments, such as money for the Safe Charlotte initiative and the jobs strategy, we're hopeful that indirectly and directly some of the crime will be reduced, and we'll end up with less 911 calls, and we'll be able to use some of that money in other areas. Does that kind of answer your question? It does. It is related. We're constantly tracking the number of calls for service and the poverty rate, and trying to understand how everything connects.
Yeah, that definitely does answer the question. I appreciate it. Just getting an understanding of the relationship between, I guess more specifically, as you said, like those other spending in those other areas and the specific calls for service.
Well, and if I could ask Tracy to chime in for a second here, just because with our Safe Charlotte plan, we also talked a little bit about a job strategy and where that would help lead us. So if you wouldn't mind talking about that for a minute.
Yes, so the job strategy is really intended to think about how we integrate all the different efforts that we have. We have land use plans, we have mobility plans, we have plans for Safe Charlotte and safe communities, but we don't necessarily have a jobs plan. How do safer communities lead to better jobs and economic mobility for our community? And so this is something that we have looked at launching into next budget year. It'll be a part of our budget request from the economic development team, but it does look at all of the efforts that we have going on in our community, from transit and transportation to safer communities, and how we use those initiatives to grow jobs for our residents here.
Our next comment comes from Hermes Goods. Are you still on the line?
Hi, my name's Hermes Gudis. I'm basically a homeowners association president in Raintree. And first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly. My neighborhood, generally, I get comments from our residents about sidewalks, transportation issues, safety, stormwater, and various things. And we certainly try to be involved as a board, but also as individuals in the process of giving feedback to the city and the county as well. So I appreciate this opportunity. Again, I would just kind of say that throughout the processes over the years of giving feedback in various forums, I was curious, how that public feedback is integrated in the budget process long term. I know that there are certain ranking criteria for sidewalks and stormwater matters and transportation projects, and we're looking, for city, I guess, guidance on some specific ones that I'm working with staff on. But overall, it would just be interesting to understand how the budget process is affected from the various user feedback over, not just this year, but prior years.
So that's a great question, and it's one of those things where it's hard to pinpoint exactly, because the way it works is a collection of people bringing the same concerns and issues to city council can result in action behind the scenes leading to a program or initiative. It can result in staff having a better understanding of specific concerns that then lead into a proposal to council for some kind of a program. I think maybe the best recent example that we can give is, and I've only been here 3 years, so I apologize, I don't have a great history before that, but when I first got here, the budget engagement sessions that we went to talked a lot about some of the investments in some of our areas that have not had some of the same big economic development investments. So we ended up in this last year's budget creating a Corridors of Opportunity program, which tries to take a holistic approach to have economic development and infrastructure. You mentioned things like sidewalks, placemaking in certain specific areas of the city that may not have seen recent investment. And so in my mind, I think that's an example of a program that really started at the grassroots, developed up through city council, through the city manager and staff, and resulted in a program this past year where we put $24.5 million into this initiative between our capital program, or in our capital program. I mean, more specifically, some of the other things you mentioned, such as sidewalks. 2 bond cycles ago, we increased sidewalks. We doubled it for a bond cycle to try to do some catch-up work from 15 to 30 million because of a lot of the public feedback that city council was getting on that program. So, I think some of the feedback that we get comes through staff. A lot of it comes through city council, and it kind of meshes together to come up with new pilots and programs and things of that nature.
Our next speaker is Monifa Drayton.
Good afternoon. First, thank you all very much for having this opportunity. So I would like to say thank you for that. The question that I have is related to both fire and the police. So the question that I have, and I want to just kind of give a very quick backdrop. In November of this past year, I'm a resident of Uptown Charlotte, and so I am in constant interaction with my homeless neighbors. And there was a gentleman who without belaboring the conversation, he was sleeping, and there was an incident that occurred. He was sleeping in a building uptown, in one of the condos uptown, and they considered that he was trespassing. He had been arrested 5 times for trespassing. I happened to walk into this situation where there were 3 police officers and a fire truck. So in total, there were 8 or 9 people, perhaps, for this one gentleman. As he was speaking, I immediately realized I have a 20-year background in healthcare, started off in behavioral health. I immediately could see that there was a mental health crisis happening with him, which was not recognized by CMPD. The question that I have, is there an opportunity for there to be a redesign or a revisit on how we approach those who are in mental health crisis, or those who are not in a dire need for both police and fire? Because it, to me, appeared to be an extreme lack of consideration, I'd say, for, or just lack of good use, lack of good stewardship of the resources. Because to have eight different agencies, 8 people from different agencies, all shining their lights in the eyes of a man who was having a mental health crisis, who could not even really give his name, who had been arrested 5 times in 1 week, but because he is not violent, they could not keep him. So they'd arrest him, and let him go in 30 minutes. This has been a rotation. So to stop the rotation, I asked one of the police officers to escort him while I followed behind. This gentleman actually was involuntary committed for several weeks because of his mental health crisis. And so, I've worked in this space for a very long time. I really think that the system is antiquated to have fire department and police to show up. And I understand the concern for safety, but this man had proven to be no threat every single time, or not a violent threat, every single time he was arrested. So I would just really ask if there is a way to save resources, even if it's not a huge chunk of the budget, but is there an opportunity to redesign, to look at how we show up for mental health crisis? Is it necessary to have both the fire department and CMPD to show up on these calls? I just really feel like that would be an opportunity to redistribute some of the funding. It just didn't make sense to have that many people for one man who did not know his name, who had been arrested 6 times.
Thank you. A great question, and it leads into one of the initiatives that City Council had been working on and approved in October, a plan which I'll talk about a little bit. Specifically to that incident, of course, we wouldn't know operationally why they decided to send who they did. They make those decisions based on 911 calls when they assess risk. But I think your main point is it necessary to send only law enforcement officers to an incident that isn't violent and maybe mental health related? And that was one of the questions that was put in front of the Safe Charlotte committee this past year. And what we ended up with was this broad Safe Charlotte initiative that City Council passed in October for us to be continuously developing. Two of the things that were in that initiative, which I think speaks directly to your point, is we had a crisis response team already that would pair a mental health worker or a counselor with a police officer to respond to certain mental health situations, with the idea being that you're trying to use the counselor to solve the situation before it becomes a criminal activity. And so what we did is we doubled funding for that from what City Council approved. And so we're doubling the use of those counselors that will be available. But then on top of that, one other aspect that they approved is a pilot for the city to create a response model for those type of incidents that does not involve law enforcement officers. So some cities across the country, such as Denver, the city in Oregon as well, they developed a program where they send a couple of either a mental health worker or a counselor with an EMT. And so there's no police officer, and they basically are trying to resolve situations like that. And only if the situation continues do they then involve police officers. So it's had pretty solid success rates in some of the other areas. We recently partnered with a consultant to fully develop the program, which we're hoping to have operational early in FY2022. So I think what you're speaking of is something we've heard a lot from the community, that City Council unanimously approved that would be a very good tool in our toolbox to resolve some of these issues before they escalate.
Our next speaker is Megan Dunn.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I wanted to ask for funding to be prioritized for quality and affordable housing for low to moderate income families in Charlotte. It looks like with the bond and the 2021 budget, an amount of $50 million was allotted. And so I'm hoping that can be increased. The dramatic increase we've seen in involuntary homelessness in Charlotte is an indication that affordable housing in our community is an emergent need. And then I'd also like to see more investments in emergency management, more positions for emergency management planners. Our community needs to plan for emergent infectious diseases such as COVID-19, and we need to plan for more extreme weather as we've seen throughout the country in 2021, recently in Texas with the massive utilities failures and recent local issues, closer to home include pathogens in Union County's water supply last year. So I'd love to have more plans to address those type of emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your feedback on that. We added 2 emergency management planners in this past budget, but I think there's a recognition that the world has changed more than we expected. We appreciate that feedback. As for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the $50 million that we approved in 2018, we've just about spent. There's about 2,800 units that were financed. The new bucket of $50 million that was approved in November just recently became available, so they're making plans on that, and I certainly understand your feedback on how to prioritize that money. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Clifton Castleton.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Okay, good. Yes, it's Castello. So my wife and I have a shop in Plaza Midwood called Moxie Mercantile, and I serve as the Plaza Midwood Merchants Association president. But I wanted to just assert the importance of the business matching grant program with you, Tracy, and just let you know what a big deal the BDOP grant is for us here in Plaza Midwood as we support our small businesses. And just make sure that all of the business matching grants make their way into the budget. Each of these grants does an amazing job in supporting our small businesses. These are examples of the facade grant and security grant and others. For our organization in particular, the Business District Organization Program grant is an annual fundraiser that generates a lot of excitement for our members and helps us to really have impact within our business community through beautification and marketing and other community efforts. So also wanted to give a shout out to Holly Eskridge and Christy Floyd, who are wonderful to work with, and Lori Lincheski and Aaron Gillespie, who are super helpful. But can you affirm that the business matching grant programs will remain within the budget, and if possible, could they be expanded on and preloaded so we know, what we have to work with from year to year? Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Costello. First, let me thank you for all of the insights you've given us and to my team, the ED team, but also through COVID and helping us put the Survive and Thrive strategy together out of our last year's CARES money and small business assistance. So I appreciate your feedback. You've been great for our team. On the business matching grants, it's a constant conversation that we've had. We've seen definitely in this past year a big uptick in participation and applicants to that. And so we are starting to see the value that brings in the community and in our corridors. And so it is something that is on the horizon that the ED team has put forward to continue to fund. And the last thing I'll add is we are constantly also looking at ways and adjusting our strategies and ways to help small businesses. You're faced with different hurdles and different things like that. And so, we want to be nimble too in the programs and assistance that we can offer.
Okay, we have a question from the Q&A panel. How did we do against the budget from the previous year?
So one of the reasons that Charlotte did better financially than many other big cities, and this is not bragging because this was way before I got here. The way things are structured is that the really volatile taxes that were impacted by the pandemic, such as hotel tax and meals tax, do not run through our general fund. By North Carolina law, those go to our hospitality funds to support like tourism activities and things of that nature. So the really big losses there didn't impact our general fund like it did in other places. We were left with a pretty sizable loss in sales tax and some of the more obvious things such as parking, that with less people uptown. But overall, we did very well. We were able to charge some things to the Federal CARES Act, which allowed us to actually generate a surplus in FY20 in our general fund. And that surplus, what it does is we use it in next year's budget for one-time initiatives such as corridors of opportunity program or jobs initiatives or things of that nature. So we're fortunate that we've done fairly well, but it is a difficult time financially because even if we don't have the huge losses that other places have, what we have had is no growth in many areas. So our city staff did, in my opinion, a good job of proposing reductions in this past budget that didn't have a direct impact on city services to the residents. So credit goes there. But I would answer that we've done fairly strong. We made a couple of presentations to City Council recently where we indicated that we had a surplus last year and that we're in solid shape moving forward.
Our next speaker is Dr. Melvin Rivers.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Melvin Rivers, and I'm with the National DBA Society. I also have a LLC consulting business here in North Carolina. I wanted to know, what is the process for vendors to myself as being a consultant to be included in the budget in regards to decision making in the city of Charlotte? It's our observation that maybe there could be a benefit of having research studies, peer-reviewed research studies where the instrument has been validated and it has internal and external validity to making better informed decisions. I guess I just wanted to know, is there a line item in the budget in regards to research studies, and what is the process to sign up as a vendor?
So you can register with our procurement office to know all of the requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, things like that that would come out. I just mentioned on the Safe Charlotte initiative a few minutes ago that we partnered with a consultant to do that, and that was after a full request for proposals process. So as a government entity, we have we're very strict about our procurement, that we do fair requests for proposals, requests for qualifications processes before we select a consultant. But as far as your other question, there's not a one line in a budget that is specifically for that. The way it would work is each of the departments would have a contractual services line that they may use in a specific case to get a third-party consultant for help in a specific area. So as far as being able to understand the type of consultants we may be looking for at a given time, the best contact would be through the city's procurement office, and we have your email. We'll take that down, and we will help make that connection.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great. So we have one more question from the audience. What considerations will be used when developing the budget to account for unforeseen issues such as COVID that was an unforeseen pandemic?
So this past year, we were very fortunate that the federal government approved funds that not only helped us stabilize some things within the city, but it also helped us to turn around and get a lot of money into the community that we otherwise could not have. So the federal government, of course, is able to deficit spend. We are not. So when an incident like this happens of this magnitude, there is a dependency on them to be able to give money to localities to then help out. Looking for my notes here, we we received $154 million from the federal government for CARES Act, and the majority of that went to the community in the tune of business programs and housing programs to help us get through this pandemic. We've been, in my opinion, a good partner as far as pausing water turnoffs and things of that nature. So we've depended on the federal government to do a lot more than maybe we would have expected, but that's not the only thing we depend on. We also depend on us being structured financially so that when a situation like this arises, we're able to pay our bills, we're able to keep our service going at a reasonable rate. And one way we do that is we always have 2 months of operating revenue in the bank, for lack of a better term, as our fund balance. And so in a absolute crisis situation where we did not get federal support, we would be able to depend on that to try to reduce the impact to residents. So I think part of the answer is federal support is going to get us through many things, but we also have fund balance available if those situations do arise and we don't get that support.
Okay, we also have another question from the audience. How do people raise awareness about improvements, road, transit, etc., needed specifically on Harrisburg Road, Pence Road, Robinson Church Road, and East Charlotte? A CIP project modeled after projects like Shamrock or Beatty's Ford would be ideal. How can this be built in the budget? This area is growing rapidly, steadily increasing, and the current infrastructure doesn't seem to safely or adequately support this growth. How can funding be specifically directed to this area?
So I'll take that. This is Taiwo Jaiba with the Planning Department. That's a question that could actually be applicable to any part of our city right now, especially areas like East Charlotte that's really growing fast. In the last 2 weeks or so, we've met with a new group that was formed by Commissioner Jarrell. I think it's the Far East Neighborhood Coalition or so, where there's a lot of growth happening. So one of the things that we are going to be doing over the next several weeks and months is what we call mobility town halls. We are looking at that as an opportunity for people to provide input into what could become projects, transportation and transit projects that could eventually be rolled into a future transformation and mobility network referendum if that ever goes to the ballot. And that will help in a major way because it would definitely mean an increase in funding for transit and non-transit projects such as sidewalks, even improved intersections and motorways. In the absence of that, though, we do have a typical transportation bonds that goes every 2 years, and over the next 10 years, that will generate incrementally some funds for us to be able to invest in areas like this that are very critical, where we see a lot of growth happening, but we don't see a lot of infrastructure at the same time. So once we have the dates for those mobility town halls or meetings, we will notice that definitely, and you will be aware of that so that you can participate in the process. It really will be sharing with you what we have in our Transportation Action Plan today that was adopted in 2017, and review those projects and see if there are new projects that should be included or incorporated into that plan. Thank you.
Our next question is very similar, but I'm going to go ahead and read it because I think it's important. What is the method to provide feedback, requests, and how do we know when infrastructure topics are on council agendas so that residents can speak?
So one of the more obvious ways is we publish the agenda typically on the Thursday ahead of the meeting and you're able to sign up for any action items that may be related to it, but you're also able to see some things that might be on the agenda that might be of interest to you. For instance, on Monday's agenda, Ty is going to speak to council about the 2040 vision plan, which encompasses a lot of what you're speaking of. Can you read the second part, Tiffany?
And the second part was, and how do residents know to sign up or to speak?
Sorry,
for this?
the first part.
Oh, the first part. What is the method to provide feedback and requests for infrastructure projects?
So I think we do our infrastructure through our budget process. The way that capital projects work, we are planning well ahead of time. For instance, I'm not sure exactly where that specific intersection from the last question is, but Robinson Church Road is one area that's in our advanced planning fund right now to work on infrastructure for road improvements there. And that may not happen for a few years based on budget constraints, but we already have engineers working on the issue. So I think the same mechanisms that you would provide feedback on other budget items work there as well. These type of budget feedback sessions, Ty's talking about mobility town halls, anything where you're connecting with the city, whether it be city council or city staff about your initiatives and priorities, would fit there for infrastructure projects as well.
Awesome. Another question from the audience. Is 20% of property taxes too high for debt service?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I would actually expect to get the question the other direction, because when we talk to people, a lot of the priorities that we get are around transportation and affordable housing. I will tell you that the majority of tangible improvements that citizens can see for transportation and housing comes from our debt program. So that's where you're going to have the real initiatives. Otherwise, the housing budget in the general fund is really to pay the staff that works on some of the initiatives. It doesn't pay as much for the infrastructure improvements and things of that nature. So council has the ability to change that amount, make it higher or lower. But this is what was approved in the FY21 budget. We wanted to maintain the operations that we were doing so that citizens didn't notice a big decrease in operations from COVID. But that is up for discussion to split just like any other thing in the budget.
Great. We got a question about affordable housing. So many cheaper housing units have been demolished for condos. Question is, why should citizens have to pay for this housing? This should be made a priority, I believe, taken from developers. I think I got that question correct.
So if I'm interpreting that, when you say citizens shouldn't have to pay, as in they're saying tax dollars shouldn't have to pay, that it should be from developers. Ty, are you able to talk a little bit about what can and can't be required from developers as far as affordable housing?
Yes. So North Carolina is one of those states where we cannot require developers to provide affordable housing units. And so, for example, if a developer comes and says they are building 100 units, we cannot ask them to set aside 10%, 20%, or whatever number. We cannot require them or mandate them to give us a percentage. However, though, there are developers who will, number one, voluntarily come in and say that we're building this for affordable housing units, either 100% or set aside some. And we welcome that. And secondly, there are those who still want to build market rate, but they will ask us if we can support them with their initiative to provide a percentage of that for affordable housing. We welcome that as well. Something that we can do, however, as a city is we can incentivize. We can, for example, expedite the rezoning process to cut back on time for them, or put them on a queue to go faster through the process. We want to do better. We've done a couple of those, but we like to do better than where we are today. But again, we don't have that mandate from the state. So the best thing we can do is to partner with developers and incentivize them and hope that there will be more developers who come in really voluntarily and, coming up and say, we want to do this. And we're seeing a lot more of that these days. So it's a welcome thing.
Thank you for that. Another question from the audience. In relation to Monifa's experience with homeless and the recent disbandment of tent city. What activities, programs, initiatives are planned to mitigate another tent city situation?
So I'll answer very broadly. This is more of a operational question than a pure budget question. I will tell you that we have resources available from the federal government that are fairly significant right now around preventing homeless, around keeping people in their home and helping people. We have additional funding for what's called the Emergency Solutions Grant, where we can work with people to address homelessness. In normal times, we work on affordable housing, and the county works on homelessness as part of their social services bucket. But in these types of times, there's a lot of resources from both that have the responsibility and the ability to address some of these issues. So I think that's more of an operations question as far as what will we do operationally. As far as the financial and the budget, we do still have resources available from the federal government to help with some of these issues. And there's also potential that we may get more dollars from the federal government coming up shortly to continue some of these initiatives.
Okay, so I think that's everyone that we've had on the list. Oh, okay, I have one person, I think they've already spoken and they may want to speak again. Sterling Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I have a comment, more of a comment instead of a question this time. And, I just want to note that I think there should definitely be an increase in spending and innovation. And this may or may not include technology. So things like redesigning processes and procedures, rethinking operations, policy solutions and implementation. So generally things on spending on things like design thinking workshops and ideation sessions, journey mapping, and even like prototyping and testing new solutions and ideas. And I know that things do happen today, but I believe there should be more money to support more ongoing work led by dedicated innovation professionals, public ones. So this will mirror what's happening in the private sector. So like at banks and hospitals and manufacturing facilities, they have dedicated people on their staff that are focused 100% on innovation, leading these workshops and leading these efforts. And they have a lot of money behind their operations, and they're seeing immediate and tangible results today. This would mean paying for these professionals to be on your staff 100% focused on those things versus those responsibilities, and then also equipping them with the resources and tools they need to do it effectively. There's a lot of organizational innovation models where these efforts are led by people who are not 100% focused on innovation, whereas like they're focused on their day job and innovation is a secondary thing. And they almost either always fail or never really truly get to implement the things they come up with. And so I just want to make that comment that I think it's very important to increase spending on innovation programs in order to drive the city forward in the future.
Thank you, and I really like that comment. I will tell you that over the last couple of years, we've put more and more responsibility into a data analytics office that we have in INT, and the work product that we're getting from them would really support some of the ideas and what you just said.
Okay, our last speaker that we have to sign up is Hermes Goods.
I'm sorry, I think that's a mistake. I've already spoken. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Since we don't have any additional speakers, what we would like to do is close out with another poll.
Let's do 3.
3, okay. Let's see if we can do a couple more poll questions. So while we have you on the line, we can get as much feedback as possible. So if we can do the third question. Yep. Great, that's really good feedback for us to consider. I'm just going to pause to make sure there's no additional comments or persons with their hand raised. Okay, great.
All right, we want to thank everybody. We'll get you out of here a couple minutes early. I really enjoyed that. I thought you guys had some really interesting questions and some good thoughts, and we really appreciate it moving forward. Thanks, guys. Please go and enjoy the rest of the beautiful day.